What we've heard about in the last couple of hours, there are many threads that could be whole conferences on their own. And it was exciting to see some of Billy's drawings in Rob's, wherever Rob went, in his, like, they're coming to life. So that was kind of cool. So expanding our transportation options, making sure underserved areas have choices, acknowledging the effect that transportation has on greenhouse gas generation. How much our mindsets need to change to design a new future. We had a little bit of that this morning as well. So here we are. We've got to try and pack this all in. And what I've done today is bring together these three very different people to offer their perspective on how all these challenges can really be woven together at different scales. We know Billy. He'll be our astrobiofuturist. Deb is an educator and biology translator. And Chris is a recovering urban planner, he says. And also he works in neighborhood community development right now. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is have each of the panelists give 1 minute bold statement. Here's where I'm coming from. Then each one of them is going to take 4 or 5 minutes to kind of expound on their original idea. They're going to ask each other a question, just one, and then we'll throw it out to the people in the room and those online for their questions. So our first short, bold statement is from Deb.
Thank you. It's great to be here today. I represent my identity as a woman and an ally and an advocate for other marginalized groups. And I'd like to honor the Mississauga and the descendants of the Erie and the Kaskaskia First Nations, upon whose ancestral lands we're all gathered today to purposefully meet and envision a better future. I have such privilege to be here giving a 1 minute statement about what I believe. I believe modern Western humans are in trouble. And the root cause is a massive collective disconnect from nature, from our ancestors, from ourselves, from our communities, and from the impacts of our actions. We're still adrift in the myth of progress and infinite extractive capitalism. The cure is reconnection and remembering on a colossal cultural scale. We're being called urgently towards humility. We really need to listen deeply. White supremacy, colonialism, our extractive and dominionistic relationship with nature must be reckoned with, so that together we can co-create a regenerative human culture that doesn't just stop at doing less bad, but actually does more good if we are to avert our climate catastrophe. And we'll need to humbly call upon all of the diverse ways of knowing in order to meet this challenge. I believe stakeholders of all ages, nations, races, genders, classes, education levels, and yes, all the non-human stakeholders as well, deserve equitable opportunities to be seen and heard and welcomed at the design table so that we can collectively reimagine the purpose and the possibilities for our transportation and mobility systems in ways that can heal. Every perspective must be valued. Only together will we be able to co-create a restorative, then regenerative, and kin-centric culture and a future for all Earthlings. Thank you.
Wow. All right, Mr. Alvarado.
Thank you. So, as we let's see more. Oh, you're good.
I didn't do that. I did. So while the sexiest examples of both biomimic design and traditional design in transportation are focused on going faster and faster. This is actually contrary to how movement and transport takes place in nature, with a few small examples such as the kingfisher over there. So other than the actions usually that are taken by predators or prey, movement in nature is slow, concerned with broad disbursement, concerned with efficiency based on being slow and in concert with nature. You look at the migration of butterflies, for example, that go from deep into the southern hemisphere into the northern hemisphere and do this on a biannual basis. No one would design a car or a train or a plane based on the butterfly, but that is how nature moves. If we really want to take our cues from nature, we have to be willing to move at the speed of our slowest members of society, of our slowest neighbors. Our overwhelming focus on speed will result, honestly, in the same predatory damage to communities, to our society, to our earth, that examples such as the interstate highway system and airline travel have inflicted. We have to be willing to go slow, and in doing so, really and truly heal this planet that we inhabit.
Thanks, Chris. All right, Billy. Well, no.
Just hard acts to follow. Despite everything I said this morning, that's right. So happy to be here. Despite everything I said this morning, we need a moratorium on innovation in certain industries. What would the world look like if our world's best engineers were focused on creating sustainable products and not making an inconsequential app work faster? How much more adaptive and resilient would our cities be to climate change if our country's top designers were dedicated to developing new building materials instead of the latest smart fitness machine? If you had the chance to divert the world's best engineers from one industry to another, much like it sounds like Hyperloop is doing, which is amazing, that level of collaboration, what would that industry switch be? What would you have us focus on? And do we really need smart refrigerators? I don't know. That's
Right. Thanks, Billy. All right. So you've got a lay of the land, so to speak, of our three speakers. And so Deb, to my tech guys, Deb is going to be first, and then Chris, and then Billy. So take 4 or 5 minutes to just kind of expound a little bit more on what you are sharing with the audience. Sounds good. And then Deb, yeah, you're good.
We're good. Wonderful. Thank you. I think transportation moves so much more than people and materials. It really moves culture. And fortunately or unfortunately, there isn't a silver bullet that's going to transform transportation and mobility, because it's a complex adaptive system, right? And it's interconnected with a whole lot of other complex adaptive systems and influenced by them as well. So as such, we really need to think about taking a systems approach in addition to making those important stepwise tweaks for each of the small scale components within transportation and mobility. Right? And when we really zoom out, way, way, way out to think systematically, we realize that we aren't just trying to transform transportation and mobility. We're seeking a much bigger shift than that. We're really thinking about building a regenerative culture, right? in which humans don't just do less harm, we do active good. So moving beyond degenerative, beyond sustainable, beyond restorative, and getting into the way life functions here on Earth, and that is regenerative, right? And so we are actually seeking to become welcome species here. And the only model we have for doing that is nature itself. Nature is the only regenerative model we have on the planet. And in nature, reciprocity is the law. Reciprocity is the law of nature. And so when we think, like Janine Benyus says, about learning to create conditions conducive to life, to be, really thriving earthlings, we have to kind of humbly relearn that we're nature too. And it's comforting to remember that not all humans are living in a disconnected state from nature. There are folks who recognize their deep connection to the natural world, and it is wise to consensually and humbly welcome traditional ecological knowledge and to honor the wisdom of not just our elder species, but our elder human ancestors as well, who for more than 15,000 years have been, regeneratively caring for the homelands and the biodiversity that's living on them. So I want to help us really contemplate how to, the changes we need to make transportation and mobility infrastructure. It's really about shifting our perspective, zooming way, way out. And we might just reframe that question as, what does it mean to become a good ancestor? So that's a lot bigger question than how do we solve transportation and mobility. But I want to challenge us to think about the problem that way. I want to encourage us to consider how deep reconnection to nature, really deep reconnection, not just superficial, but we can start with superficial to get deep. But deep reconnection has tremendous leverage for creating systems change and addressing our climate crisis. So, many of us are living in a disconnected state. We are disconnected from nature and from ourselves and our ancestry, our community, our purpose, right? And that disconnection stokes fear and othering and a lack of belonging. And we were talking about how folks want to live on the edge of the city so they can escape more frequently, right? So as we discover our deep interconnectedness to nature, which we are rediscovering, we're reawakening and remembering how to ask nature's advice, right? How to welcome nature back to the design table and also into our midst. Because, nature is an amazing mentor, right? And model and measure for what fitting in on Earth really entails. And we can look at how elegantly this tree has integrated development with growth, right? So Giuseppe Pannoni is the artist, and he's carved out the inner sapling that still dwells within the tree trunk, because trees grow from their fingertips and they also grow outward. They integrate development with growth. In my neighborhood, we're not doing such a great job of that, where we're building suburbs at a rate that's much faster than the infrastructure is keeping up with. And then we act surprised when our roads are congested and clogged and we don't have the infrastructure for dealing with stormwater runoff and our neighborhoods are flooding, right? We might also think about, we have an integrated development and infrastructure, right? Development with growth, the way nature does. Great model there. Or the ladybugs, who are masters of low energy processes and multifunctional design, right? Their wings are strong and they're rigid for flight, but they still have elasticity and they can fold into this intricate origami-like way and still, fit snugly under their waterproof, hard carapace wing covers. And what inspiration for everything from launching satellites or unfolding antennae or building better drones or microscopic medical instruments, right? All sorts of amazing things. Maybe umbrellas. I'm all about umbrellas. I want one that works like a leaf petiole. But, that inspiration is all around us, right? But we need humility in order to welcome these diverse voices to the design table and remember how to ask nature's advice as students learning from nature, right? From nature, not about nature, for a change. So disconnectedness is the problem, and reconnect has huge leverage in the system for changing human culture. We can springboard us towards improved wellness, more trust, stoke the parts of the system that are working well, right? Justice, creativity, connectivity, that builds better leadership and understanding what we need to do together so that the system is less adrift, because we need to build infrastructure that reconnects humans to nature and reconnects humans to community and reconnects humans to purpose and the impacts of our actions. So we need to get out of our isolation mobiles and into our cities, right? We need to create community and welcome nature into our urban landscapes, because nature isn't somewhere to escape to. It's everywhere. It's all around us. And when we stop othering nature in our own homes, right, then we can welcome it into our cities, deepen our respect for it everywhere, heal our disconnected spirits, and help save what we love. So a deep reconnection stimulates an awe of nature and inspiration from nature, and it stokes the action that we're going to need to springboard us into the innovations that do matter to preserve nature and ourselves. I mean, we are nature, right? And so together we can avoid climate catastrophe. Thanks.
Right. That's just Alvarado.
Deb, thank you. Let me see. Will this do its thing? We'll wait for a little bit. So while we're setting up the presentation, I'll give a little bit of my background. So as Carol said, I'm a recovering urban planner. And the reason I bill myself as such is because, one, the work that I've been doing over the last 8 years in the Broadway Slavic Village neighborhood of Cleveland. We're 5 square miles in the heart of the city of Cleveland. And it is a community that very much reflects what legacy cities look like. We're a microcosm of the city of Cleveland, in that we're a little over 50% African American. We're about 40% white, mainly Eastern European, Central European, Appalachian, and a growing population of folks who are Latino or Latina. And it is a neighborhood that is very much a palimpsest. For folks who are familiar, what a palimpsest is, back when paper or parchment were very dear, you wouldn't just write on a piece of parchment one time. You would use it over and over and over again, because it was so valuable, the ability to be able to translate the written word. And neighborhoods like ours, cities like Cleveland, are living palimpsests that are built on the fabric of nature, that have the native cultures, the way that they moved across the landscape, the main paths that they took, that were based on the driest, highest ground in those areas, so that they did not get bogged down. They created the first paths that then, as European settlement came in and then the displacement took place, they adopted those very same roadways and byways. So folks who live in Cleveland, for example, who travel along Center Ridge Road, that was a native trail that before then, back during the glaciation, the recession of the glaciers that formed the Great Lakes, was a sandy space. And so we build one on top of each other as we go through this, and very much our cities have kind of been informed by nature, not just in the fact that they use that palimpsest or that original parchment of nature, but that they grew organically. And the concern is that, we don't take those examples that we've got. So we talk about, how does transport take place in nature? Here at the molecular level, capillary action that takes place in all animals. It's not concerned with speed. It's concerned with disbursement and being completely connected. If you have any part of your body that is not connected by the circulatory system, it dies. Simple as that. You look at plants. You've seen these types of examples all over the place. And the reason that you see that is because this is nature speaking to us. While there may be, these your main vein structures that carry water, that carry nutrients through trees, through leaves, through plants, they are themselves connected to every single cell within that organism. And then you look further at things on a macroscopic level. How is it that water moves across our landscape? The development of river deltas that infiltrate every part. Again, while water may move quickly in some areas, for the most part, water is slow. It moves with a deliberateness. How is it that we build off of that? I talked about the palimpsest of cities earlier, and this is what downtown Cleveland looked like a little over 100 years ago. Apologize for the quality of this, but it actually kind of makes the point a little bit better in that, you didn't start off with highways. You didn't start off with railways. You started off with paths that were built off of where our native people moved. They became connected to, you developed neighborhoods, block by block, house by house, much as a tree develops or a human being develops. It doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't happen with a quickness. It happens deliberately and organically. Anybody who grew up in Boston or visited Boston recognizes that right away. You see how organically that city has developed over time, or any European city, or any African city, or Asian city, anywhere that you go, they are developed with a deliberateness. And over time, however, we've turned it into this. I say this as a complete hypocrite, as someone who got into a single person vehicle to get here and gets more speeding tickets than my insurance company would like for me to get. But this is what we've developed because of the sexiness of speed and our desire to move quickly and to get to that place faster rather than building community. And so I'm proud of the fact that while this is what the neighborhood that I serve looked like at that same time 100 years ago, with streetcars, with roads, with some railroads, that we were able to pretty much keep that very much the same. The railroad went away, but like the palimpsest, we replaced the railroad with a walking, biking trail. How is it that we can continue to do this kind of work as communities? And that's a part of why we're here.
Thank you, Chris. All right. A case for slow. Interesting. That's really interesting. All right, Billy, 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll move on.
I love that. Now I've got a million questions. So going off of that question, or the idea of a moratorium on innovation in certain areas, I wanted to just share with you a couple of interesting concepts that I came across. So there is this idea called Chindogu, which is an approach to design that is intentionally ironic in a lot of ways, where designers design things. You mentioned you wanted an umbrella. We talked about rain collection earlier, so there's some overlap. But the design of these things, it's innovative, but the usefulness of it is actually not practical whatsoever. And there's a lot of humor and intent and parody that goes into this design approach. But I think it actually speaks to a lot of things that we are designing today for the sake of innovation. And I think innovation for the sake of innovation is a problem that feeds into ideas like speed and novelty, which is, something that our brain craves and is also kind of afraid of, which is interesting. And so here's a couple of non-intentional chindogu examples that I've come across personally. One is the smart coffee table. This smart coffee table has a cool refrigerator, and it can charge your laptops and other things. Oh, and there's a drawer there for stuff as a throw-in. This next one is a smart trash can for people who are too lazy to put their foot on a lever to open a lid. You just wave your hand in front of it, and so we're mining for lithium for batteries for things like this right now, right? And this is a smart stirrer where you can press a button, and if you're just, now if there's some imparity or some, physical challenges, that's one application. But as a mass-produced item, this is kind of ridiculous. And then, of course, who doesn't need a smart toaster? Am I right? Because having your bread warmed up needs to be intelligent. So, these are the kinds of things that I'm referring to that I think we need a moratorium on. I think the amount of intellectual resources, the amount of raw materials, and the amount of sheer waste that is produced as a result of electronic waste, 50 million tons annually is what we're producing, and that electronic waste is the fastest rapidly growing amount of waste that we produce. And so when you think about what all goes into creating that toaster, time, materials, resources, intelligence, what could we be designing instead of a trash can that you have to wave your hand in front of? All that brilliance that went into making that something that could be economized and commercialized. What are some areas that we would like to put that in? In the framing of the idea of transforming transportation, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's over 400 different models of car types. And what you see below are some of the newest entries, as well as the one in the canoe at the top. There's over 400 different models of cars, and then there's about 25 different types. What I found most interesting about this is Henry Ford, who did not invent the assembly line and did not invent the automobile, still was able to revolutionize America in a lot of ways because he created an efficient process that allowed the cost of manufacturing of a vehicle to become something that the average American could begin to afford. And so this idea that there's this quote that says from Henry Ford where he says, any customer can have a car painted any color that they want, so long as it's black, right? He had one model. He had one car that he was innovating around, and it came in one color, in part because of some efficiencies and challenges with paint and things like that. But it's this idea of innovating around process that I think is also a behavioral shift that we need to further explore and entertain if we're really going to be serious about addressing a lot of the problems that we're currently facing. Yeah.
All righty. Thanks, Billy. All right. We're going to do a quick inter panel. Okay. So Chris, would you ask Deb a question, something that's on your mind?
Sure. So we are awful as a society at being guided by marginalized groups. Otherwise, they wouldn't be marginalized, right? Are there examples in nature of, or can you describe some examples in nature of how it is that feedback takes place, that guidance is provided by small species, small parts of an organism to guide the better functioning of that organism or that ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that great question. When we think about, and that question is so fun because it's so scalable, right? When we think about the way nature works with feedback loops, systems are as small as a cell or a chemical pathway. And, a cell is a system, your body is a system. And we can talk about systems at the ecosystem level or the earth as a system. But one thing that they all have in common is these self-regulating feedback loops, right? So when we take a look at natural systems, we've been sold a bill of goods about them being really competitive. Mm-hmm. But that is actually not the way nature works. Natural systems are much more cooperative than they are competitive. And the checks and balances mean that all the components come together for the greater good through feedback loops that limit anything that creates too much imbalance in the system. So in nature, those gradients, big, strong gradients of any sort, unregulated distribution of resources are just naturally going to shift back. And we call it the adaptive cycle on the big scale, where change is inevitable and the system keeps itself in balance through perpetual feedback loops that redistribute resources and re-provide opportunities for folks waiting in the wings. What we've created in human systems is a big gap in the distribution of resources, and we're long overdue for a redistribution mechanism in our adaptive cycle. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
All right, Deb, what's on your mind to ask Billy?
Yeah, I have a question for you, Billy. We've been thinking about efficiency, right? And I think human innovation often goes there, but when we make gains in efficiency, we don't necessarily use less resources, right? Because as we get more efficient at things, we just do more of them. So as we get better with our gas mileage, we're driving longer distances. And so we're actually using more resources. So that's, kind of a conundrum. And I'm wondering how you feel about, should we be focusing on efficiency gains, or is there an area that you think has game-changing capacity for where we should innovate in this smart way?
I love that question. I love that question. And there's a lot of things that we as humans have designed to distract ourselves from making hard calls about things that make us feel safe. And there's this great book called The Molecule of More, and it talks about dopamine and how dopamine has facilitated our evolution in a lot of ways by kind of driving us and motivating us to look for more or secure more, right? So there's this feedback loop that we have in our brains that, when we look up to the sky, you often have this feeling of awe and wonder. And part of that sense of awe and wonder is a kind of inherent quest for more, because the idea of looking for more resources is tied to our sense of security of resources about our well-being. So from very early on, we've developed this mechanism to allow us to imagine beyond our current boundaries of our body as a way for us to secure our own survival. And so over time, we've been able to hack that biological mechanism which is why you see in advertising the idea of more, new, advanced, efficient. And I think efficiency has become one of those distractions. When what we really need to, in my opinion, focus on is the behavioral and mental paradigm shift back towards the idea of limited resources. Efficiency is great, but when, for example, we're no longer connected to having to hunt and kill our own food, that connection to the life forms, that there's a sense of sacredness that I think, not as a religious statement, but there's a sense of the sanctity of life as it relates to us and other life forms that I think we've kind of, as we've become more industrialized, we've moved away from. And in that expansion, how we were just talking about, escaping the city, and I think you both kind of were mentioning how, like, the idea of escaping the city is a form where we're literally chasing, as we're erasing, we're chasing. And so I think the underlying part of that is really the mental and behavioral work that is hard to do because it challenges our comfort. And now the things that we're going back to are the things that we had before pretty much the Industrial Revolution. But the idea of going back to those things challenges our current sense of security, which is why we chase more. And it's a hard answer, but I think it is the answer to the question that you're talking about. We have to get back to a point of, again, connecting ourselves back to the natural world, but also, there's this idea that companies have to become responsible for the products that they produce, and everything should have the life cycle. So all of those new electric vehicle companies that are, going to be, now that this lithium, bill and all of that stuff is in the works, when I was talking about elephants earlier and the 30,000, the 6 million calories versus the 30,000 parts, there's the idea that, we could take one of those bolts as one of those 30,000 and melt it down and turn it into a soda can and, recycling, right? Which is great and it has its place. But there's also the idea of, once this bolt no longer works to the standard of operation for a vehicle, what else can that bolt still live and do as one of those 6 million calories? What can that bolt then be used for? I think is another way that we typically don't think about things that I think is part of that solution.
Thanks, Billy. All right. Now, Billy, you have a question for Chris.
Yes.
And then think of your questions, and not just questions, comments as well, both online and here in the room.
One of the things that I loved in seeing your talk about the Slavic village was it made me think of Central Park in New York. And I think, how Central Park displaced a whole bunch of predominantly African-American communities for the creation of that. And I think it was Slavic village in New York too that was replaced. I can't remember, I might be wrong on the name. But it also made me think about, reports that show that our current buildings, the current buildings that we live, move, and breathe in, are not built for climate change. They were built before, so they're not adapted to the world that our children are going to inherit from us. And, I know that these things predominantly affect communities of color and simultaneously low-income communities who often overlap. And so I was just curious, from your perspective, how do we get to a place where we are designing adaptive cities that don't have those communities as afterthoughts or as the inheritors of us being distracted by novel ideas of building cities?
That's a good question, and something that we actually grapple with as a staff and as a community all the time. And I would even argue that these structures, these single-family homes or these two-family homes that were built around the Industrial Revolution weren't even made. They weren't made certainly to deal with climate change. They weren't made to last more than 40 years. I mean, these were oftentimes very disposable structures that were built by the steel companies and Standard Oil. Rockefeller got his start here in Cleveland. They were built by those companies to house workers to feed back into the machine. So what are things that we can do or that we're doing already? First is, of course, pulling together the resources that are needed in order to make adaptations to those structures where we can, to have them, at the very base level, meet green building standards. And so we've been able to influence programs that are taking place in the city of Cleveland that prioritize the rehabilitation of existing structures, vacant structures, to meet green building standards. And by doing so, you're able to get a 15-year property tax abatement. It's a way to incentivize those types of investments. But it's something that can't be done on a structure-by-structure basis alone. It's something that really needs to be done on a neighborhood-wide, a community-wide, a regional basis. We are, as a neighborhood, going through the roadmap phase of the eco-district plan. I don't know how many folks are familiar with eco-districts. You can look that up, and it's generally used as a way to guide new development in ways that meet three major principles, that of equity, resilience, and climate protection. But we're applying it to an existing neighborhood with existing folks, wanting to keep them in place. And so that is a process that, as a recovering urban planner, we're guiding, but not beginning with the plan, actually beginning by developing leadership among our residents, particularly those who have been most marginalized. How is it that we move them to a point where they are recognized as the experts that they are with regards to our neighbors and are able to stand on level ground with an executive director of a small nonprofit organization, the bank president of the major employer in our neighborhood, the mayor of Cleveland. And so that's, we can't look at it on a structure by structure basis. We actually have to look at the entire way that we develop and invest in our communities.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to be coming to you for a comment or a question from online, but it's, at some point I'm like, oh, we're straying off of transportation, but transportation is it's tied into equity. It's all woven together. So I appreciate all of your comments, all of you. It's been great. So Britt, is there anything burning online? Maybe not burning. I shouldn't talk about burning.
Having some really nice conversations and tying into the systems and behavior and innovation of products. Since we have to change that, what are your ideas on marketing and advertising to shift that behavioral and systems mentality toward competitive, positive climate action?
And if no one has a marketing message, is there anyone here that has a market? Oh, we have someone. Oh, no, you don't. Do your best. And, these are things we have to figure out. We have to figure it out. Chris, are you going to take it?
Sure, I'll take it. So I don't know if it's so much a marketing message, but let's, think about where you can choose to go on vacation, right? Where are the places that give you life? Do you go to a national park and do you walk, do you hike or do you bike around that park? Or do you go to a major city and you get rid of the car for a couple of weeks, right? And instead you live as a native, you walk around, you take public transportation, you get to know the neighborhood in which you're staying. I would argue that most folks, when they choose what gives them life, they go to places that actually represent what transportation or transport in nature actually looks like. It's slow, It's dispersed. It's involved with seeing a lot of different things versus going from one place to another as quickly as you can. And so maybe that's the way that we market it. We talk about building our communities, building our places in ways that allow for that transportation, for that efficient, but life-fulfilling transportation to take place.
All right, Colleen, the microphone. Oh, you do. You have the microphone. Somebody didn't.
So on the marketing side, I think there's 4 questions that every business can ask themselves. 1, does it hurt or harm human beings? 2, does it hurt or harm the earth? If your answer is yes to either of those questions, then no, you don't get to do that business. 3rd, does it help humans? 4, does it help the earth? All of our resources based on a meritocracy will be allocated to those people first. One other quick side note here, the one word that I have not heard yet is population. And massive concentrations of anything in nature is toxic by definition. And you mentioned the natural redistribution of resources in nature. One of the great things about the Hyperloop transport is no longer do we need to have massive concentrations of people inside urban centers. You can live and spread. Just a quick note, if you divide all the habitable land with all the people on the planet right now, everyone gets 2 acres. So there's no reason for us to be living on top of each other anymore. If you have a high-speed transport system that can move people to the places that they need to work, no one needs to live 12 million people on top of each other. You can spread out throughout the countryside. And in 2 acres, you can live far more harmoniously with nature than you otherwise would. Few things.
Interesting. Billy, you want to go? Oh, gosh. Okay. We are going to go closer towards lunch, and we're standing between us and lunch, but that's good. Autumn will have a question after Billy comments, and then we'll go to Colleen.
I think everything you said was poignant, and there's 2 thoughts. I want to harp some love on Hyperloop as well, because they mentioned vibranium, which, as a nerd of Black Panther, specifically a Black Panther nerd, I love that. And so as marketing material, for someone who, I'll just say it, there's 4 Black people in the room. Hearing that reference made me feel seen just as a fan of that property. And in terms of marketing, I think some of that is what Deb mentioned around the idea that nature is everywhere. Nature and people, different types of people, are everywhere too. So in terms of marketing, from a diversity standpoint, when you're talking about how do we advertise nature, it's showing the people who are there, which is everyone. And then in terms of what you were talking about the density, I think there's 2 things there. So going back to the idea of kind of challenging core assumptions, I think the idea of ownership is something that we also need to reevaluate in our present context, and all of the things that come out of the idea of land ownership and how land ownership is tied to the decisions that we make around population densities and all that. I personally believe that there is enough of the earth for all of us to have everything that we need. A lot of it is just in those core assumptions we're making about, the if and then of whatever it is that we're designing. I think that was the only thing I was going to say. So, yeah.
All right. So, Autumn, and then Diane, could you take the microphone to Colleen? You want to raise your hand, Colleen? We have another question. Okay. Autumn.
So I think there's some interesting conversations around this, but I question the idea of marketing, and because it's telling people what they want rather than really looking at what people want. There's some interesting work out there with conservation psychology, and it's really looking at what's your audience. This tends to be, in this sort of forum, it's a preaching to the choir. Mm-hmm. There's people here with similar interests, but, I go back to the conversation about the car, and the mobile real estate really struck me because I think about what the car is to people. And when you can afford it and what kind of car can you afford. And there's a status symbol with it. And so it's not about yes, it's selling the car, but changing that, you have to change what all of that means to people.
Yeah.
And it gets more to the idea of the audience segmentation and how do you meet people where they're at. So it addresses DEAI, and it's not about selling the idea. It's about meeting people where they're at.
Nice. Great. Oh, Colleen.
Nice. So first of all, I wanted to say this is a really interesting topic, and I'm really grateful for this conversation because not only is it challenging, but it's also optimistic because I think it's inspiring all of us to think about these things and, consider this as we move forward with our innovations and research, whatever else we do. I specifically focus on inclusive design and trying to integrate that with biomimicry because they both are, approaches that kind of strip the problems down to the base and then build up, right? So as we think about how we can solve, engineering challenges using nature, we can also think of how we can make them more inclusive and not change the population who can use them, but just expand that to more people. So, and I was thinking more about this, and actually, Chris, you touched on this a little bit about, when we start engineering or designing for more people, we're trying to consider more marginalized communities and maybe underprivileged communities to expand access and get other people's input. But I was curious if anyone has an idea about, it's nice to be able to say that, right? And I think about that a lot in my work. But what kind of ways do we have to, tangibly integrate people in the workflow as we design and engineer to expand these spaces and opportunities?
Somebody want to take that?
This is going to go beyond the principles of biomimicry, but it has to do. It all goes back to those with power willingly ceding that power to those who don't have power, making that conscious decision, doing so with that mindset of how is it that we not just preserve what we have collectively, but how is it that we enhance what we have, in recognizing that each one of us plays that part.
And it will enhance. Nature runs on diversity, and the more diverse we are in our groups, the more resilient those groups are. The benefit will become obvious, and sharing power will become a positive feedback loop as soon as we can just get started with the inclusive mindset.
And that's part of one of those behavioral shifts I was talking about. It's easy to talk about efficiency when you still maintain control over what is being done.
Okay. And John said we're dealing with this mindset of scarcity, and when you deal with that mindset of scarcity, then power becomes that much more important. But we honestly don't live on a scarce planet, right? We have what we need abundantly.
Okay, well, we've got two people. He's going to go first, and then you. Yeah.
So this is for Billy mostly. I loved your presentation on elephants, and I before you even showed the elephant vehicle, I was like, let's build an elephant. Great, you made all the points. We can do it. But every time you said a moratorium on innovation, my heart as an MIT engineer would skip a beat. And 2 points for that. I think you're a bit misled here. If you think that the best engineers are designing smart toasters, no, those are not the best engineers. Okay, let them design smart toasters. Let them be there. If you want to put a moratorium on innovation that would actually make a ding, put a moratorium on innovation of weaponry. We are spending trillions of dollars on the fantasy that if we make the killer robots first, they won't come back to hit us. That is a much bigger problem than toasters or stirrers or anything. Forget those things. Let the kids play with those things. Stop the adults from making more weapons.
I totally agree with you, and I want to clarify something. What I was specifically talking about was innovation for the sake of innovation. And I think it reminds me of Jurassic Park, right? That's the thing that comes to mind, right? Not the, life always finds a way part, but the idea of, did we ever stop to question if we should be doing this? I think is really what I was going after in saying that. So I totally agree with your approach, and not necessarily that the engineers are working on that, but more so just the thinking of mining the earth to create microcontrollers and computer chips and all of these different elements that goes into allowing someone to do a motion that they're doing anyway to lift the lid of a trash can. Like that amount of engineering of thought and resources, it just doesn't seem like that's the right place for us to apply. I think the thing with weaponry, I totally agree of, and it's kind of ironic and interesting in a couple of ways. And I'll make this point very, very briefly. But we are here at NASA talking about the future of space exploration, which in a lot of ways was rooted in the idea of preventative military measures that the U.S. government wanted to take because of what was happening in Russia at the time. So I totally agree with you, and I would love for us to have more conversations around space where the priorities are set by Native and Indigenous people and how they view the stars. I think that it's an interesting take because when you bring in other cultures and the priorities that they have and the belief systems they have, when you empower them with the same level of technology, what then does space exploration become about? What conversations beyond mining asteroids do we get to have from someone who views the Earth as sacred?
Keep it there.
Yeah.
Think. What do you guys think? He could go. You have.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
Oh.
No. No, I think that.
Oh, Davis got something to say. Okay.
No, seriously.
Okay.
No, I just had some acknowledgements to make, if I could, and really, really briefly, and I forgot to put my acknowledgement slide up, but I just wanted to say thanks so much to my home Department of Biology in the College of Charleston and to my teammates and colleagues at Biomimicry on the Ray. You're going to hear about the Ray and some future upcoming talks, and I look forward to talking more with you about the work being done there, transforming transportation and innovation in the highway of the future, and also colleagues at Sharing Nature's Genius. So thank you, and I just wanted to acknowledge them.
All right, Britt, I'm glad you're good on your feet. I just met her today. Britt, you're good on your feet, right? Is there any thread coming through online that you want to share for our last thing before we head to lunch?
I think just sharing and echoing how great of a panel this is today.
Oh,
how wonderful the thoughts are. What's said and unsaid is expansive. So,
well, thank you. Thank you to those online who have contributed. All right, one round of applause for everyone. Wonderful.